We're gonna let everyone in. All right. Greetings, happy Thursday, Artfare live virtual studio visit / interview. I'm Carolina Wheat, your host, and tonight, so proud to present Kacey Jeffers. Welcome.
Thanks. Thank you for having me, Carolina.
Yeah, thanks for being on the Artfare app, Kacey. I mean, it's been really exciting to discover new artists I hadn't even seen or known about your work until, I saw you come on the app. How did you get on to Artfare, actually?
Well, I think I saw, on Instagram, I think I saw someone, a publicist, she had posted like she had, I think, bought some prints or something, and she had posted about the app, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is like something that is, modern, and it's like right now, and it's an interesting take on like, being in that space. So I was intrigued.
Definitely. Yeah, it's just such a timely piece when Artfare started prior to the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking to a couple advisors to get them excited about buying artwork online, and they really poo-pooed me, even though a couple were friends, and they're like, no, I don't do,
Right.
I don't do that. I don't buy art online. Now, you have these elaborate online viewing rooms, which,
Right.
it'd basically just be a fancy website, but folks are definitely buying 100,000.
Isn't that like so ironic with the way how COVID and like these times have sort of, leveled the playing field, or it has sort of unearthed new pathways and stuff like that. So I just find that really, really interesting.
I find it interesting too, Kacey, and I love that you said level the playing field, because that is precisely those exact words are euphemisms that I've been using in relationship to, running a small gallery and seeing the large galleries and the mid-tier galleries and, the small artist-run galleries be online and be able to, and I've discussed this a little bit with other folks too, it creates a very harmonious presence for those galleries that can be limber and change with the times, and artists that are able to also acknowledge that the stigma of selling online or not having a gallery, kind of taking your inventory into your own hands. It's, what is it? Necessity is the mother of invention. It's kind of already been here, so it's nice that it's finally getting acknowledged.
Yeah, I think that it's like you either do or you don't at this time.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's really great to see you, and I'm wondering, where are you right now?
So right now I'm at home in Nevis. Nevis, for those of you who may not know, it's like a small island in the Caribbean. It's near to St. Bart's, like maybe an hour southeast of Puerto Rico, and near to Antigua. And if you're a fan of like Hamilton, you would know that Alexander Hamilton was born here in Nevis.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Fanny Nesbitt.
Yes.
Fanny Nesbitt. Yeah. I used to live in St. Kitts. Hello.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Well, we're nice. Excited to have you here today, and I really want to, create a conversation about some of the work that we've seen on the Artfare app, but also talk a little bit to the work that you may not have on the app, kind of like get a little taste of the history and the things you've been doing. And if everyone can just maybe mute your video or your microphone, so we can have Kacey in the driver's seat here. Kacey in the driver's seat, that would be great.
Yeah. So probably I could start with like a brief like history of myself, I guess. So I grew up here. I left when I was like 27 and I moved to New York. So that was like 2015. I moved with the intention of pursuing photography.
Mm.
Prior to that, like growing up here, I had no sort of concept of, like a creative world, because here for us, it's a very traditional society. So, it's like everyone sort of pushes for like a traditional education and like a traditional career path, a doctor, a lawyer, accountant. For a very long time, I was on that path, and I think somewhere around like 17, 16, 17, 18, like it really started to, like, it just didn't feel authentic to me. But at that time, I didn't necessarily know what was like my path, because there wasn't anything else that was necessarily different around me to say like, oh, you could do this. During that time, I sort of discovered like the world of fashion through modeling. And that then opened up my eyes to like a creative space, and even like I wouldn't say that at the time I didn't thinking about creativity or that I was a creative person, but sort of being in that space really broadened my perspective as to possibilities. So fast forward to 2013, I was working here, and then I left the island and decided that I was going to go to New York for a couple months, and didn't really have any plans, but I just knew that I wanted to be there. And then from that, I sort of used some modeling contacts and started doing like testing with models and stuff like that.
Mm.
So even prior to that, because I was in the sort of fashion space and I was very curious about everything there, like I would educate myself about the business. So I knew like the photographers, I knew the models, I knew, when I say no, I mean of their work, the photographers. I became obsessed with like just
Mm.
knowing everything I could about, like the industry and like about image making specifically. And then by the time I was ready to sort of transition to being a photographer, that idea of what I liked in an image had already been ingrained in my mind. So it wasn't much of a difficulty to sort of transfer that knowledge to what I wanted to do as a photographer.
Mhm.
Um, and so that was basically the beginning of it for me.
So,
And mhm.
Casey, question. So, as a model, you just being around the elements, being around other photographers, commercial photographers, fashion photographers, so you genuinely just picked up kind of where and what they were doing. So you're kind of like basically trained on the job, correct?
Well, not necessarily in that sense, but more so in the sense of looking, like doing research
Mm-hmm.
of like the great photographers like Peter Lindbergh, like Jürgen Teller, like Stephen Meisel. Because I was just like, whoa, what is this
Mm-hmm.
world? And I was so curious about it. So I would spend like a lot of time on like Tumblr, like looking at pictures and just like really liking them. And but even then I wasn't thinking necessarily that this was going to be my direction in terms of being a photographer. But I was in London in 2011 and something switched for me, and it was at that point where I was like, okay, I can see myself doing this. And then
What,
I came
what's
um
switched?
I think I was around a friend of mine who's a photographer, Fabian. He lives in Paris now, and I was sort of like assisting him informally, and just the way that I guess maybe the power dynamics of it felt more alluring. He was the one calling the shots, and literally, and I kind of like that in some ways. So I think something switched internally, and because I already, I knew about like Mapplethorpe, and I knew about all the photographers, like in a fashion space, especially.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like an organic step to want to explore that. And yeah, from that point, like I made it. So between 2013, 2015, I would come up to New York like whenever I had vacation here. and I would go and like test with models and meet people and sort of build like a little network. And then I finally got the opportunity to move in 2015 when I got like my work visa. So I lived there from 2015 to 2018 full time, pursuing photography, I'd say. Um, and then, you know, during that time, it was, you know, it's about like for me, it was about like figuring out in some ways who I was as a photographer. And then on the other hand, like figuring out that and also like the survival aspects of it and like all of that, and just like trying to find out who I was as a person while living in New York, which is like the craziest place to do that, I think. But
Right. Well, I mean, it's you're so easily distracted in New York, but also inspired. You know, it can be so
mhm,
overwhelming, yet it can be so inspiring. It's just the pace.
yeah.
And we always talk about how in New York, the ante is up. Like everyone's always the best of whatever they're the best
Hmm.
at, you know? And so
Right.
it sounds as if
Or some people have, you know, the best access to whatever it is. You know,
access.
you don't necessarily have to be the best in New York. You don't,
So true. The
you
access,
know.
the network, and otherwise. So it, you
Yeah.
know, so it wasn't just, you know, on the job, and it does sound like you had a great amount of personal research that you were doing in
Hmm.
relationship to photographers that you admired, and yet you're also, you know, learning with alongside of a friend, but then, you know, it's funny to say like learning about or finding yourself in New York as, you know, so many young people,
Right.
you know, strive to like what's my style, right? And
Hmm.
yet, you know, mid career to also, you know, think about what's my style. You know, it's a constant reinvention, I think,
Hmm.
the self.
Yeah.
And
It's
so
an evolution, you know.
it's an
It,
evolution, and this
yeah, it
self that
is.
we're finding.
Yeah.
And
For me, you know, at that time, I wasn't even thinking about the evolution of myself in relation to the evolution of my work. That would have come much later, as I'll discuss as we go through like a PDF of my work. But so you know, I was in New York. Even though I had an idea of what I liked in an image and everything, still I don't think my voice necessarily was as clear to myself, um, because you know it's still like you, I was still like trying to balance like the, you know, the everyday life of living there and, you know, shooting and stuff like that. But I remember for me, when I started to tap into something deeper to like create images, the first story I'm going to share on my screen now.
yes, please.
Uh, so the first story that I did that came from that space, and this was probably around 2 years in living in New York, that came from a space of wanting to transcend, I guess, unknowingly wanting to transcend like a commercial space, but more so to want to say something with my work. Does that make sense? Wanting to say
Yeah.
something and wanting to have something to say. So this first project, it's called Uncontrived, and it was in collaboration with a stylist, like a whole fashion team, but it came from a space of being in New York, and there was like a lot of, I remember a summer, I think there was like a lot of like police killings of Black men, and it was just like, for me, having grown up here my whole life and being in the majority, then going to the US where you're not, and sort of, in some ways, having to define what Black meant for myself, you know, it was very exhausting. And, you know, it was like a combination of a different things that really started my thinking of, you know what, I want to create something that shows Black women as normal.
Yeah.
As crazy as that sounds. Um, And that project, we dubbed it Uncontrived. And I'm just going to go through.
Please do.
Are you seeing it?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
both
So
images are so fantastic.
thank you. So we got like 5 of the top models who happened to be Black. And we all went to like a house on the Upper East Side. And for 2 days, we did this project. And for me, it was very much important that, you know, the young ladies, they looked normal. And I can't stress that enough because it's like so often in fashion, especially, it's easy to sort of fetishize or like, you know, sort of exoticize Black women. And I just wanted to do something that was simple, that was, you know, fashion, that was portraiture, that was, you know, in some ways had a documentary feel to it, but felt real ultimately. And I
Casey,
think
just
this for me. Mhm.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you go back to the image, the previous? I just want to note the subtlety of the portrait on the left, the figure, the way the light is lit behind her, almost the outline, the highlight of her head creates, you know, such a fantastic line that mimics the scoop neck of the dress. And it's just such a wonderful understanding of that
Thank you.
light. It's just so
It's
fantastic. And
it's so funny because it's so funny you say that because only recently I went back through that shoot and I re-edited it and made some different selections, and this wasn't in the original selection. But that just goes to show you that, you know, it's like the evolution of yourself as a human being, as a photographer, how
absolutely,
that works sometimes, you
yeah.
know, because
And
like I made different choices now. And
yeah.
I found that fascinating, you know.
Mhm. Well, you have different eyes. It's like
Yeah,
opening your eyes. Your eyes
yes.
constantly kind of re-examining and developing
Hmm.
that eye is it's a natural progression, right? Yes, I'm sorry to stop you. I had to note because
Hmm.
that halo is just like it's just exquisite. But yeah, please continue.
Hmm. So you know the series, Kitchen Table series by Karime Weems. So that is one of my favorite series ever. And I wanted to reference that in some way. So that was like the foundation for this project. Um, hello? Okay, you're there. That was like the foundation for this project. So you see here on the right, there's like a hint of a table, to like sort of, you know, honor that project.
Oh, the colors in that one is just fantastic.
Thank
Casey,
you.
are you printing? Are these are digital images, correct?
Yes.
And are you having any hand in printing these? That last one, I even felt like it was coming from an RA4 processor. I mean, it just some of the warmth that's in this.
It's
And what are
you
you
know,
shooting
it's
with?
so funny that you bring that up because I always get asked if I'm shooting film.
Mm,
And it's like, no, I've never shot film in my life. I
mm,
wouldn't even know where to start. But for some reason, I don't know if that goes to, you know, me looking at like a bunch of pictures that sort of informs, you know, the way I light, the way I see color and stuff like that. So I think it's probably like a lot of that, because film has a, you know, like a warmth to it that, you know, digital generally doesn't have.
it sure.
So I always find that interesting that people, you know, ask that same question all the
Mhm.
time.
What camera are you using?
I'm on like a Canon 5D
Sure.
version of 5D, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because the you just nailed it on the head. I think your research and deep dive into photographers of
Hmm.
past um, has
Thank
definitely
you.
formed some of these the lighting and the compositions as well.
Yeah, and like painting, I looked at like a lot of paintings and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I look at like I find for me, especially now, I think I'm more inspired by especially if I'm like shooting something that's in a fashion space. I more tend to look at like documentary or reportage photos because I find though like those photographers like they shoot it so beautiful, and like there's composition, there's like storytelling, there's like single image narratives and stuff like that, which I think you don't really see that much all the time in like fashion photography, like, of today.
I
um
don't. I think that there is definitely a drive or a move towards fine art photography within the
mhm,
fashion world or commercial world in that respect. It's
mhm,
a fine line sometimes. I know we don't need to wax philosophical about it all, but it does, and we've seen just being in the dark room, fashion photographers now are shooting in film. They are
right,
printing, or they're shooting in slides, and then they're printing, and then they're scanning
yeah,
print for the magazines and otherwise.
right,
It's kind of like the Uber processing of the work. But I just wonder, and I ask you, the that fine line that we're talking about, where these images absolutely in my head, and potentially many of our guests here today are listening to the recording, understand these works to be very much categorized into a fine art world.
mhm,
And yet and your practice and your concept for these pieces sit in that context, right?
right,
Yet
yeah. And I think for me, like, and this is something that I think initially I kind of struggled with,
mhm.
and now I'm just like, fuck it, I'm gonna do whatever.
Yeah.
But I think like for me, it was like, I think fashion photography, it's almost sometimes like the clothes first. But for me, that was never the case. I was always more intrigued by the person and who this character
Mhm,
is. And I
mhm,
think that has sort of helped me to, I guess, you know, at least to offer a question to like the viewer: is it fine art or is it whatever? I mean, ultimately, it doesn't really matter to me what it is because I don't really think about things like that. I think from the perspective of I'm a photographer, full stop. And even
mhm.
to take that, even to reduce that down to like its finest
Mhm.
point, it's I'm a creative, and for now, and photography is the medium that I'm
Yeah.
using. And it doesn't really matter if it's like a fashion photograph, if it's like documentary. In fact, I actually love having, and I've given myself that freedom now to sort of merge these different genres, and I really love doing that. Yeah, and ultimately the foundation of like my work, I think it's portraiture.
Yes, I
And
would think to
then
agree with
like,
this. Absolutely. And
yeah, and then like everything else sort of goes around it, the portrait of the person, to sort of flesh out the story of who that person is or what the situation is, I think.
yeah, I mean, someone could absolutely create that narrative arc even with these women that you shot in this portraiture in the Uncontrived series.
Hmm.
I had a question. When you went to the Upper East Side and you got this, building, and you found the clothing for the models. Is that correct?
Well, I worked with a stylist for
You
this. So
for
this
style.
was a stylist, yeah. So
Okay.
like the subsequent project is with a stylist
Okay.
who I've worked with. And and again, it's like fashion really is about collaboration, and like the
Mhm.
stylist has a point of view as well. And I think like with this particular stylist, Nick Nelson, we've worked together on that project and on this upcoming project. It is like a very good relationship because oftentimes sometimes like you get into like a fashion space and like a stylist might come with a heavy hand, where they want to, it's like, oh, it has to be this dress or it has to be that. And then it started to me, you sort of lose the essence of the image and who the person is, because you're like wanting to be a trend, or you're wanting to, like, this project, this was shot in 2017. That's like 3 years ago, and it could have been done yesterday. And you, if I told you it was done yesterday, you'd have believed. If I told you it was done 10 years ago, you'd have believed. You know. And this one, Soon Come, this was done in Jamaica. And at this point in my career, I started to think now more so of wanting to really have my work have a strong meaning and a strong like cultural identity. And even though I was in like a fashion space, you know, and really by convenience, I was in a fashion space because I knew people in that space and whatnot. And it was the most accessible to me. I wanted to now start to fuse fashion with like some semblance of culture and some semblance of where I come from and like the people I know. And for me, this project represented, you know, worlds, and in a sense, it sort of says, you know, you can live in like the ghettos of Kingston, Jamaica, and you could have a dream. And in my mind, the clothing here, which is like all designer clothes, is sort of representing that possibility. You know, as simple as it sounds, and probably as simplistic as it sounds, and it's like, yeah, fashion isn't saving lives, but you just never know the impact that that girl in this environment or this world can sort of derive from seeing someone who looks like her in this sort of scene, and what that can do for, you know, morale or whatever.
And are
You know,
they,
if you're
oh, I was going to ask about touching up. I know in, you know, for magazines and commercial world, like a lot of touching up happens. How do you feel about that?
Personally, I don't mind. I don't think my skill set is at the level of over retouching. I know I can do just enough to like to get it, you know, to like clean up the skin and stuff like that. So I think I like that I don't know, like, you know, how to do like all these crazy things, because then that keeps it natural as possible.
Straight.
So I like that, but you know, I do retouch, but again, it's like little things, and like, you know, color and stuff like that. But everything is pretty much in the image. So yeah, but it's like, you know, people were retouching in the dark room, you know.
Yeah. Dodging, burning. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like the same principles, no?
Okay, totally. Fantastic.
So again, with this story, literally we flew to Jamaica, and we casted the models there, because there's like a modeling agency there in Jamaica. We casted the models, and then we shot them all like on a Sunday between 12 to 6 p.m. It was like 10 looks or so, like 12 looks, I think, which is like a lot to shoot, you know. But it was like really good. And what I really liked about this project was that there's like a Caribbean reference, which I love. And there's like, again, that merging of cultures, which I also love. But there's also, you know, you see the themes of like narratives. You see within the shots, you see like the compositions, you see, you know, like an emotion that isn't necessarily like in your face, but it's more subdued. You see like the texture and like the colors, and you know, even like this image on the right, it's one of my favorites, because you're seeing like the dress, you're seeing the model, you're seeing a story, and you're seeing like the, you know, the environment. And I love that. I love doing that in like in images.
You just seem to capture, and you had mentioned earlier, you know, the human quality within the connection between the photographer and your subject. I think that it's an uncanny understanding you have, like a rather intuitive understanding that you have as you are behind the lens, and, you know, with your subjects, with your, you know, the portrait of, in this case, all these lovely women. The Can you talk or address a little bit about, you know, how you warm up the model, or how are you working with your subject, or how are you capturing these nuanced emotions in this gaze?
I think maybe because I had like an understanding of modeling, having modeled myself, and sort of having looked at images, I kind of, and then knowing what I want to feel. I think for me, it's about a feeling, and it's about anticipating that feeling sometimes. And sometimes it's like, you know, you could take like 5 pictures, like 50 snaps, and then it's just like the 51st that is the shot. And sometimes it's a build up. And I think over the years I've sort of maybe trained myself to anticipate that build up, and to sort of know where it's going, not necessarily consciously, but more so like intuitively. And then sometimes it's more so like giving the model direction and giving them like a character to sort of think about, and then working counter to that character. So then you create like a tension. So it's like little tricks like that I sort of like do. And again, sometimes it's for me, it's like having the model positioning them, and then creating the narrative around them. Like for instance, like on the right, like I might have asked her to sit on the rock and look off into the distance, and then I would have worked my way around to create something, you know, in the image that gives it something extra than just she's just a girl sitting on a rock. And like on the image on the left, I remember like this one was kind of one of those intuitive moments where she stepped out of the water. She didn't really want to go into the water.
Yeah.
Not that I blame her. And then she's kind of stepped out, you know, and then she was kind of like saying that she was cold. She didn't like dip in, but I think the breeze had picked up or something. And so in the moment, like I saw her when she did that, and so I called out to her, and she just looked at me kind of like off guard.
Yeah.
And that was just like, you know, and I tend to shoot really fast as well. So it's like a combination of those things, I think, that really sort of gives, I don't want to say gives the impression of a connection, because there is somewhat of a connection, and a lot of it is manipulated. You know?
Sure.
And a lot of it is sort of manufactured through like composition and stuff like that, and a lot of it is authentic. And I think for instance, like I remember in this project, in this particular shot, which is available through Artfare, if anyone is interested. I remember being in the room with Ajak, and she's like a pretty successful model, and she's been doing it for a long time. And I remember just getting like chills the way she was just like emoting, and it's like so subtle. And you know, she wasn't doing anything that was like, you know, extravagant or anything, but it was something that she was sort of exuding that I thought was just like, it just gave me chills on you know, along my spine. And I thought, so this is one of my favorite images. So it's you know, it's like things like that. A lot of it is like a collaboration as well.
It sure is a collaboration, and there you know, you're working with professionals, just how you had mentioned. You know, they're able to emote on the spot. They know their body well enough to create compositions that match the garbs that they're wearing. And yet you also, and I know we're going to get to this, but you also work with non-professional models at this, you know, creating portraiture. And so that's where I think maybe some of that some of those aha moments happen with you as you
Mm-hmm.
perhaps were kind of realizing, you know, I'm creating these personal, not manipulated moments with,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, the
I
children
mean, and
uniform.
even then, like I would say to me, even then, there is a level of manipulation. Not in the sense of like forcing them to do anything, but more so in the sense of a composition is a manipulation to me.
Of
You know
course.
what I mean?
I do.
Because then if I move one step to the left versus one step to the right, it changes the composition of the
Yeah,
image, and it can change like the feel of the image as well
sure.
without even saying anything to the model. And that is something I tend to do a lot, where I would position someone and then sort of like prance myself around trying to figure out, you know, how I can sort of tell a story from where they are and stuff like that. So it's you know, I like photography isn't real.
Right. And this every day is another chance. This is another body of
Yes.
work.
So this came about. So after 2018, like September, I returned home. My work visa was up, and I came home. And I at that point, I was in a state of again wanting to evolve and wanting to sort of understand who I was as a person on a foundational level. And a part of that was sort of, you know, wanting to strip away layers and get away from this notion of who I should be and what I should be doing, and really to find some sense of essence within myself and some sense of, you know, personal identity. Who am I on my own terms, you
Yes.
know, and figure that out. And during that time, I had been away from Nevis for 3 years, and it was my first time being back home. And I wanted to sort of, in some ways, examine myself and examine, you know, like my family and everything. So I started creating these portraits, these images, and they were put into, I call it Every Day is Another Chance. And it's, you know, it's ongoing because it's like, when does something like this ever finish, really?
Right.
Um, so we can go through a bit.
Hmm. This one I wanted to use for your like. Can we go back to that image with
Mm-hmm.
the two people? I mean, the way that the composition is presented in this piece, I think so clearly creates this divorce of energies and
Mm-hmm.
the kind of monumental time that we're spending on screens today,
Mm-hmm.
even though this is 2018, right? Maybe
Right.
um, and then the piece itself, the subjects are together yet so lonely,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so withdrawn from each other. And it just, to me, this narrative, this piece is, it's just so thoughtful and so sad.
It is. And, you know, again, it's like I'm in it and my brother is in it. And that in some ways is kind of like a relationship, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I wanted to, and again, you know, like I was in that space of creating this. And these are really like psychological
Yes.
pictures that come from like a deep place. And I think I was at a point where I was kind of like, you know, I don't care like if these things are seen, you know what I mean? And in some ways that is sort of like a healing, that in and of itself, that audacity to show these kind of things, and have them be, you know, open to interpretation, you
Sure.
know, that is like, you know, deep, and it's very empowering in its own way. And I really like this image, because it's true. It's like, um and even though like I look at it, and whenever I create stuff, especially if I'm like the subject or whatever, you know, a lot of the times tend to take on, the meanings tend to evolve over a period of time.
Mhm.
And but yeah,
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
really value this one. I like that you just said, putting something out there, I'm paraphrasing, I was putting something out there and it's open for interpretation. And you imagine painters and sculptors as well, thinking the very same thing. I mean, they're making because they must make. I talk about this a lot, but you know, this deep desire to make and putting it out there.
Yes.
That bravery,
The impulse,
the bravery to allow your viewer to interpret or bend meaning or, you know, push intentions or find something other than what your intention was. It's good to be open to dialogue, right? But it's also important to remain true to what your intention is. Yet I think it's also really healthy to have these other viewpoints to see where your eyes aren't exactly, you know, what they're not seeing yet. Just you were talking about your evolving eye as well. You have someone else looking at it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, like I said, for me, I was, you know, I wasn't doing these from a place of external first. It was more so like internal. And like to speak to impulse, like a lot of these images, I would literally, and this was so weird, like I would literally be at home when I first came back and like the idea would come and I would just get up and go and create it. And so that was very fascinating because I don't think that has ever happened, but I believe because I had sort of stripped myself of a lot of things. And again, like I wasn't like hiding behind this idea of, oh, I'm a fashion photographer and I can only shoot fashion.
Right.
You know, and I can't pick up my camera to do anything else. Like I wasn't hiding behind that. And that really opened up my spirit really to sort of like a gushing of creative waters, you know, to like do and think in a different way as to how I can sort of create images and what are the kind of images that I want to create and how. And I kind of feel like I said to myself, you know, if you are taking these kind of pictures where you're involved, it's like you can do anything because it takes such courage to shoot these kind of things, you know. So I feel like I can do anything after that.
This is that last one is so haunting.
This one?
Yes, it's so haunting.
Yeah, I think I was just thinking at the time, I think I was thinking about, you know, when you're raised on like survival as opposed to love, you know, how that can feel. And I was sort of like translating a lot of feelings that I was sort of going back within my memory and thinking about and sort of grappling with and wanting to put them out, you know, pen to paper, but, you know, photography wise. And, you know, it's just like the idea of how, you know, you can see like the heart is there, but it's like stifling still, but the heart is still there and you can see that. So yeah, that came from like a lot of, you know, deep not necessarily anguish, but like deep truths and deep questions and things that I have to, you know, look at overcoming, you know, things that are like generational traumas and stuff like that that I have to, you know, make a conscious effort to overcome. So this is like the shadow self in some ways.
And when was this created? In 2018, 2019?
So this was, I think this image was 2018.
Okay.
And this was around Christmas. So this is like our little wall unit here. And, you know, there's like all kind of stuff on it. You know, there's like trophies to the top from when like my brother and I were younger. He's 7 years younger than I am. Like when he was, you know, like in athletics. There's like a picture of me graduating preschool. There's like a trophy on the right that's mine from like this like pageant thing that we have here each summer, Mr. and Miss Talented Youth. There's like images of like, you know, it's like a lot of stuff. But like in Caribbean households, like a wall unit is like a central sort of, it's like almost like a cultural furniture acquisition.
Totally. It's got a Philip Lorca de Corsia kind of feel to it too.
Huh?
It's got a Philip Lorca de Corsia kind of feel
Right.
to it too.
Yeah, I love his work actually. Yeah. So I feel honored for the comparison. Yay.
Yeah. Well, there was a Helmut Lang one back there too, but I think he's like a raving misogynist that I didn't want to give props to, but I just whatever.
Helmut Newton. Helmut Newton?
Helmut Newton, yeah.
Oh really?
Helmut.
I didn't see that. Which one is that?
I think it was in the Uncontrived series, like when it was like just in the kitchen. It's just like, it reminded me, it was like really dark and kind of chiaroscuro.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll take it. So this is entitled Be a Man. And I think I have a quote that because also I was writing along with them. Did some thoughts. Let's see if I can read that real quick. How are we on time? Are we good?
We're doing pretty good. I think we got 15 minutes left. I would love to get some questions answered too, and I want to get to the uniform.
All right.
But please read.
So,
really value that.
So this quote that I have, and again, like things evolve, so who knows what it might be next time you talk to me. So I had this piece is entitled Be a Man, and the quote goes, ever since Adam chose to bite into the apple, the social constructs of man have slowly evolved. Archaic sex and gender expectations trap us in boxes, and to survive, everyone learns how to suffer in silence. My tears are now free to fall. I learned how to suppress them. To have water in my eyes would mean I was a girl less than a man. Our mother swallowed her tears for sustenance, ours seldom hers. When we crossed her to command authority, she would yell, I am the man in here. All along, it was an affirmation of her obligation to become more than a woman. My initial notion of a man is one of contradiction, conflict, and absence. I am willing to change. So that was, the quote for that one.
Thank you.
And this is an image that I took in my old school. And basically, this was more so at the time I was thinking about, the purpose of schooling versus education and how we are sort of miseducated. It's like the things that, you learn in school, you don't necessarily need them, in the greater scheme of things. But you sort of develop like bad things too, like people pleasing and like anxiety and like all these crazy things. But yeah, so that was me sort of passively aggressively addressing that. And this one again, I remember when the inspiration for this one came, and I just got up, grabbed the ties and put them on and did that and try to channel what I was feeling. And so before there was a period I worked at a bank after school here. And again, that was, I was sort of like in the traditional path. And that was for me, like one of the most horrible experiences on a human level, because it was more so, doing something that I didn't like and sort of, doing it, and the ties in some ways represented the ties, like the obligations, the expectations and the sort of status quo that you have to uphold, and how it's like choking me literally, and I'm like mustering up a smile, and you can see it's like forced and it's just like painful, but that's how I felt on the inside.
Yeah. I mean, I think it also not just about the 9 to 5 and the patriarchal, the patriarchy or whatever, is, that masculinity is so too, in relationship to the tie and the.
True. I never thought about that, but that is very true.
Mhm.
And then let's see where I am at. Then there's that one
Mhm.
of my mom sitting out on the veranda. So there's a quote as well. I'll just read that real quick. So it goes, parents inadvertently create self-focused children. Keep your head in the books, mind your own business, have a child's place, speak when spoken to. My mother says she's happy. I know that her life hasn't been easy. I refrain from projecting a link between the two. She loves looking her best and felt empowered buying this purple dress from Amazon. After wearing it to a neighbor's Christmas party, she beamed. Everyone loved it. Next to her love for her children is her love for plants, prominently displayed on the porch for all to admire. Maybe one day I'll have the courage to ask her, do you have any dreams of your own?
Hmm. Does she like this picture or portrait of
Yeah,
herself?
she loved it. She loves it. And I printed it out and I
Okay.
have it.
Are there any images of your mother that she doesn't like?
I that I took, yes, there was some that she didn't
Yeah.
like.
Don't ever show that to anyone.
Too late.
All right, yeah. So here we have
So
uniform.
now we come to uniform, which is like one of the projects that I'm most proud of, and I'm just like so grateful that I was in that space to be a vessel for it. And again, so everything ties into this, everything that I've done in like New York and like all the pictures that you've seen, like I put everything that I learned into this project. And because I was in that space of moving away from what I should be doing, it really allowed me to think in a broader sense of what fashion means and what art mean, all these things mean. And I really thought about what I wanted to do while I was here. And the idea came to me, and it was like portraits of school children. That's it in its simplest form. And basically, what I did was I went around to the different schools and did portraits of the school children. And then I interviewed each one of them and put it in a book. It was always meant to be a book. It wasn't like I was going to do this project and let it linger for 5 years or blah, blah, blah. I was like, I'm going to do this and it's going to be a book. And so I shot it over the space of 2 weeks. 14 schools in the book. There are 26 portraits of students. And
Did
we
you?
can go through.
I think I read that you published this yourself.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, I was like, I think I asked one person who I know who publishes, and it was just like, and for me, like, I think a theme in my life story is that I'm very self-reliant in some ways, and I'm very like, you know what, I'm just gonna do it on my own.
Right.
If I can do it, I'll do it on my own. And I think sometimes it's like when people hear, oh, I'm going to do portraits of school children, they just think of it in a very narrow way. And they would, so it's like an easy idea to get turned off from. But for me, and having lived this experience, and now having a language to sort of go back and think about what that experience meant to me and how I can sort of use it to really be a Trojan horse, as in like the uniform as a Trojan horse to sort of tell a story, a human story, about youth, about dreams, about aspirations, about individuality, ultimately. So that is what this project is really. It is called uniform in a singular sense to sort of create a contrast between individuality, which is like, isn't uniform ultimately. And it is about uniforms, but it's not really about the uniforms. That's just like the little thing. But that's the thing that ties them together and that makes it unique. And that in and of itself has been a touch point for a lot of people to sort of connect with the project. And from a nostalgic sense point of view, and especially if you grew up in the Caribbean, like you've never seen your culture, because really uniform is culture, and it's not something that we typically here would consider culture, because for us culture is like things that service tourism, you know,
Yeah.
and things that sort of, whether it's like a cultural dance or whatever, but then it's always, you know, something in service of tourism, especially now, I think, in my unprofessional opinion.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
but with this, I was very adamant in my mind that I didn't want it to be cute. I didn't want it to feel touristy. I didn't want it to feel like there were even kids necessarily.
Okay.
I had like a very conscious, when I say kids, I mean more something like an infanti, like you don't want to make them feel like, you know, like infanti, what's the word?
Infantilized, or is it?
Infanticide,
Yeah.
infantil, yeah, that word. Like I
Infant-
didn't want that. I didn't
Well,
want that.
let's see some of these shots. We got 5
Yes.
minutes, and I really want to get to.
5 minutes.
Ooh. Yeah.
So we have, well, the one on the left is an outtake, but I really loved it. So
Yeah.
I'm including it here. What I love about it is that innocence. And again, you're looking at children, but for me, when I look at it, they don't really feel necessarily like children. They feel like human beings.
Yes.
There's, you know, there's like a complexity to them that I like. And what's so powerful about it is that it's about individuality. So no picture feels like the other, you know?
Mhm.
And that was like something that I was very adamant about doing. And two, like something that we were talking about earlier in the sense of like manipulating the scene as I'm shooting to like create something dynamic and like create a connection. It's like, you know, like it's about positioning them, sorry, and then sort of like feeling my way around what I'm seeing to create something interesting. Like for instance, this image, um, this is Alexandria, and you know she was sitting, and I just thought, you know, wouldn't it be so cool if like the kids were just like running around her, and you're sort of presenting that, you know, that child who goes to school and they're like inward, and like everything is just like feels like chaos around them.
It's
Really
definitely
love
represented here.
this one as well.
Yeah.
There's Thane,
Mm-hmm.
and this is Alicia. This is at my old secondary school as well, which I was valedictorian at the time. And I remember the podium, the same podium. This is like years ago, but they still use the same podium. And I remember going to the hall there and seeing it, and I was like, oh, this would make such a cool image if I can just like compose it where she's there, she's wearing like the brown and like, you know, like her skin color, the clothes that she's wearing, the and like the podium, you know, they're like the same kind of color. And it sort of like ties them together in an interesting way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then these two I really loved.
These two together
Chanelly.
are really great, like diptych too, and the way you're
Oh,
combining.
thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they almost look like one photograph.
right. Oh yeah, I never thought about that, but you're right. I actually saw the girl on the left today actually in town.
Aw.
That's how small the island is. Like you run into them all the time. You know, it's always like now, because I've started with the project for almost like like a year and a half, going to 2 years. And now that I see them, it's like, oh my God, they're so big. And then in my mind, because I've seen them like in this way, frozen in time, like I kind of expect them to still be that.
Right.
Very interesting. So I guess as they grow up and they see these images of themselves, like I'm curious to know like how that would sort of affect their own you know, sense of identity even.
Really, yeah, that's true. And so,
And mhm,
Kacey, what's in store? We're here at 7 o'clock right now, 1900, and
yes,
I'm just wondering, like, what is in store for you? What else are you gonna do you have planned? Are you gonna come back to New York maybe after, travel restrictions or pandemic stuff? Or
definitely. Like I definitely plan to to come at some point. Right now, I'm doing like a lot of planning, trying to get this project elevated to the next step,
Yeah.
as well as, you know, feeling my way into the art world and like, you know, wanting to be in the galleries, wanting to be in the
Yes.
platforms that sort of where great photography resides, because you
Yeah.
know a lot of what I do now, it's not even about me necessarily. It's about that young Nevisian girl who sits on a desk and looks out the window,
Mm,
who, you know, might have aspirations to be a photographer and might want to know that, hey, Kacey's done it, so I could as well. And that's just where I'm at now. So yeah, things are moving, and it's like in these times you can't really plan that much, but I really just go with the flow. And that's that.
that's amazing. I'm so pleased to be able to see just a larger body of your work than what we have
Thank
on
you.
the app. And I know that you've been getting some attention, some press lately, and I believe in my heart, and I think you had even said at the beginning of our conversation before we started going live that you've even had galleries reach out to you.
Yeah, I have through the app, and I think, you know, it's like really a really good platform. And you know, it's good to, and again, like, it's about accessibility and visibility, the same, you know, driving force with my work now, especially. And I think definitely what you guys are doing is helping that that step forward, you know, and leveling the playing field, really.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be, part of it and be able to have these conversations every Thursday evening, and certainly meet folks like you, Kacey. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for.
Thank you for engaging with me.
Of course. I really appreciate you. Really gave us a better understanding of your practice and your absolute fantastic understanding of fine art photography as well as commercial photography. And I think that the combination of both of those things is really fantastic to consider in relationship to your career.
Yeah,
You're gonna
definitely.
make
Huh?
You're gonna make it. You made it.
I am making it. I am making it. We speak in the present. We speak in the now.
Yes.
I am making it.
You're
We're all
making
making it. We're all making it through these times. We're all making it.
That's for real.
I'm gonna shout out Douglas Cordell. I see he's here. So I'm gonna shout him out.
Oh yeah, and thank you for everyone that's joined this conversation tonight and over the weeks. And this, if you miss any, will be it is recorded, and I'll put it up on YouTube in the next few days. But next week I have Ivan Rios Fecho, and we'll have more conversations about new things. Thanks everyone. Take it easy. Stay strong.
Bye.
Peace.